Hi, this is Lou from Glowing Pigs International, and this is the second in a series where we're talking about activity states and how to save persistent data as an activity goes through its states. Now, in the last tutorial, we just took a look at when the states are passed through based on things that you do with your cell phone. So, for example, if you leave an application and go to the home page and then come back, we saw that the activity is not destroyed, it's just paused and then stopped, and when you come back to the application it's restarted, so you don't lose any data by doing that. However, we saw that when we hit the back button, something very different happens and your activity is destroyed. The whole application is shut down. So what we did to view that was we put tags for the log in all of these events: on destroy, on pause, on restart, on resume, on start, on stop, and then two special events called on save instance state and on restore instance state. Now, if you don't remember what we talked about, you might want to go back to the prior tutorial, because there's also a chart in there that shows you how all of these events are related. In this tutorial, I've created a screen, and the screen has a checkbox, two option boxes here, so you can choose either one of these radio buttons. And then we also have the button play stop, which you saw in earlier tutorials that dealt with music. And the idea behind this is we're going to activate each one of these and then do some things on the phone and see how they're affected, and see where we have to save data and where we might not have to save data in order to bring that data back next time we get into the activity again. So let's just take a look first at the screen. The main XML here is we've got a checkbox, we've got a radio group with two radio buttons and an orientation of horizontal, and then we have button play stop, which is a regular button except that it uses two graphics from the resource area in the drawable folder. There's a pause button graphic and there's a play button graphic, and it uses those to switch between pause and play. So let's take a look at our activity. It's the same as before. I have all of this that we had before, but I've also added some things so that we can test out our screen and see what happens when we check things, hit radio buttons, etc., and then leave the activity and come back to it. So I've created some variables. First of all, this tag has the name of the application, and that way, as we're watching in the log to see what happened, we know that it's related to this application. And we've got variable for the checkbox, the two radio buttons, and button play stop. And then we have this Boolean variable, which you probably saw in the earlier music applications. It's saying whether music is playing or not, and we initialize it to false. And then we set up the checkbox and the radio buttons and button play stop. And I'm going to take out this because we don't need this. And then we have a method called set button play stop, which initializes that button play stop. Basically, it's looking at that Boolean variable. It's saying if music is not playing, then you want to display the play button, which means you're going to set the background resource to that drawable that's in that drawable folder to play buttons SM. It's a ping file. And then if music is playing, then you want to set it to the pause button so somebody can stop the music. So that's basically what we've got in here to start out. And let's see what happens now when we do things to the screen. So let's set the checkbox. with a check. We'll select option 1 and we'll set this to a pause button. And now, why don't we first, using Control F12, switch the orientation. So now we're in horizontal mode, and if you notice, we still have our checkbox checked like we had before. We still have option 1 selected, but the button play stop went back to play. So let's figure out why that happened. Well, if we look at the last things that happened when we switched orientation, we called on save instance state, on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So the complete app was destroyed, everything was destroyed, but before it was destroyed, on save instance state was called. And then when we return, we start up again, but on restore instance state is called, and then on resume is called. So that is why our basic screen items retain their data, because on save instance state and on restore instance state save the data and put it back in when we came back to the activity. However, this is our own customized button here, which also relates to a variable in the application. It's determined by that Boolean variable is the music playing, and that variable is not one of the screen items, and so therefore, since we didn't specifically save it, this went back to a play button because that's how it's initialized in the program. So how can we change this? Well, one thing we could say, okay, and let's just go back to vertical mode. We could say, well, since it calls save instance state and it calls on restore instance state, we could put our variable information in there, and then it'll be saved and restored. So why don't we try that? First of all, I'm going to create here a few more variables because we're going to need them moving forward. We'll start with this one, which is, we'll put this up top, and this is called, oh, we want to put it up here. This is a string named music playing, and basically the string is going to say music playing, and this we're going to use as part of a key value pair to save some data. Okay, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. So now if I scroll down here and I get, let me just get the information that we want here. We want to put something in save instance state to save the value of that variable. That Boolean variable is the music playing. So, well, we don't need this, we already have it. So what we're doing here is we're going to save it in a bundle, and the bundle is called outstate. And so the way to do it is we say outstate, put the Boolean variable bool music playing alongside the key music playing, and that will save it. So let's just save that, and then to restore it, when restore instance state is called, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, we need to get, well, first of all, we need to check, is save instance state is there anything there? So if it's not null, and if it also contains that key music playing, then we want to set our variable bool music playing to the value that we saved in save instance state. At the same time, once we get that value, we want to set, using the method set button play stop, we want to set that button to whatever that value determines it should be. So we're saying if the value is false, we want to set it to play. If the value is true, we want to set it to pause. Okay? So let's save this and let's run it and let's see what happens. So again, I'm going to set the checkbox. This time I'll select option 2, and now I'll set this to pause. And now again, using Control F12, let's change the orientation. And as you see, it stays paused because we've now saved the value of that variable that determines whether this is a pause or a play. And if you'll see, if I set it to play now and I do it again, it'll save that too. And if we look at the log, let's get this out of the way for a minute. And let's look at what happened in the log. You see, we have the same things happening all the time. So as long as we have save instance state and restore instance state, it's going to save the state of that. Okay. But now I'm going to trick you guys and show you where you can have a problem. Let's say you not only do you want to save it when you change the orientation, but you want to save it when somebody leaves the application. You want them to be able to come back in and everything on the screen should remain as it was when they left. So let's say we set this to pause, and now we hit the back button. And then we want to come back in again. What happened? We lost everything. Oh my God. What are we going to do? Well, here's what we have to do. Let's first take a look at the log and see what happened. Well, when we hit the back button, we did an on pause, an on stop, and an on destroy. But we had no save instance state. When we came back, we had an on start and an on and resume, but no save instance state. Now if you notice, in all of these, regardless of what you're doing, we seem to be calling on pause and on resume all the time. On resume is in all of these, and on pause is in all of these. So let's do this. And this is really how you should handle most things. Unless, there are complications which we'll get to. But let's change our code. What we're going to do is we're going to save these all of these values in the shared preferences. Okay, you can save them. You have a choice of saving them in shared preferences, in a file, or in a database. These are simple variables, no big objects or anything like that, so we're going to save them as shared preferences. So let's get rid of this again. We don't need these anymore in restore and save instance state. We're going to move them because they're not save and restore instance state are not called all the time, and we want to be able to keep our screen as it was no matter what somebody does with the application. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some code in here in on resume and on pause. So I'm going to get a few more variables here and plug them in up here. I think we have to import something. Yeah, we have to import shared preferences. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a variable that names our shared preferences. So this is going to be called prefs when we instantiate it. Then we're going to have the string that has the name mypref, and then we're going to have a Boolean variable for radio button 1, 2, and the checkbox indicating whether it's checked or not. And then just like we had for music playing for a key value pair, we're going to have these keys for key value pairs for the radio button and the checkbox. Okay, because shared preferences are also saved, just like the instance state. Shared preferences are saved as key value pairs. Then we're going to put some code in on pause. So let's find on pause. And we'll plug some code in there and I'll explain it. So what we're saying is, first of all, we want to initialize or set that Boolean variable for each of those screen items to its correct value. So we're saying if checkbox is checked, then the Boolean checkbox 1 is checked is true, otherwise it's false. And then we do the same thing with the radio button 1 and 2. Then we want to instantiate our shared preferences. So we're saying prefs, which was that variable we declared up top, equals get shared preferences pref name, which is my pref, if you remember up here, and then mode private. Mode private means that these shared preferences are only for this application. Okay. And then we say we have to open an editor which allows us to save this data. So we say shared preferences.editor, we call it editor, equals pref.edit. And then we want to put these values, the key value fields, into shared preferences. So we say we have Boolean values all here. So we say put Boolean, and then the checkbox, the radio state, the button state, and then this music playing Boolean variable. When we're done, now this can also take integers, it can also take strings, etc. When we're done, we do a commit, and that saves the data to the shared preferences. So now that we've saved that stuff, we want to on resume, since on resume is called in all of those cases. In on resume, we want to grab that data and set our variables accordingly. So we'll plug in this here, and we're saying same thing, instantiating prefs mode private, and then we want to set the checkbox to whatever the value is in checkbox state. Now the second value here is the default. So if there were nothing in checkbox 1 state, then we would set checkbox.set check. We would set that checkbox to false, meaning it would be unchecked. And we do the same thing with all of these. The second values are the default values. So here, the radio button, we pull in the value. We want to set that radio button to whatever value we had saved. Set this radio button 2 to whatever value was saved. And then we want to set this is music playing to whatever value this is. Now I think I pulled in some extra code here, so let me just pull this out. Sorry about that. And that pretty much should take care of it. So as you can see, it's fairly simple to save your states, so long as they're simple simple objects or simple variables. And let's run this and we'll see how it works. Okay, so let's set this to option 2. We'll keep this as pause, and we'll set this checkbox. Now what we want to see now is if we do a back button, when we come back, are all these things going to remain as they are? So we'll hit the back button, which if we look at the log, has done the on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So we're hoping that in on pause all our information was saved properly. And when we come back, see everything's still there. And that's because if we look at our log, on start and on resume were called, and they both, and in on resume we restored our data that we had saved in on pause. Now there's one other condition we want to check here. Well, there's a couple other conditions, but I think we'll find that we are covered. Let's check if we go to the home and then we come back, what happens? We've still saved everything, and that is, if we look at the log, we can see what happened when we go to home. We had an on save instance state, but we did an on pause, so that helped us save our data. And then we just did a restart. There was no destroy. There was just an on start and an on resume, and an on resume we grabbed our data again, so we were okay there. There's one other place that we should check, and that is, let's say we're working and then we have to make a phone call, or we receive a phone call. So I'll hit the phone button and we'll call this number, and then we want to talk, and then we hang up, and now I want to go back to the application. Everything's still there. Now let's see what happened when we did that. Basically, when we did the call, pull this up, you can see what happened. There was an on save instance state, an on pause, and an on stop, and then all this stuff happens to deal with the call, and then we do an on restart, on start, and an on resume. So on resume and on pause are called in all of these instances, and therefore our safest bet is to save anything we need to save within those two events. Now if you know, for example, that you only have to save things when somebody changes a screen orientation, then you can save it in save instance state and bring it back in restore instance state. So you just have to remember, though, to really think through when you want to save information and when you don't want to save information that you want to display on the screen, and that will help you figure out how to do these things. Now I'm going to take this a little further in the next tutorial and tie it back to the application where we're playing music in a service. So I hope you look forward to that, and I want to thank everybody also for your questions and for your subscribing. And if you have any more questions, please post them and I'll try to answer them as well as I can. And if you see any mistakes, please let me know too. Alright, we'll see you next time.